Ezra Klein then had Ta-Nehisi Coates on his show to discuss Ta-Nehisi Coates' response piece. I think it's an interesting conversation. And again, I think it is informative. I think that Ezra Klein, this is going to sound kind of hyperbolic, has been dangerously positioned as a thought leader or even as a public intellectual or political theorist. I think this is dangerous because I don't think he's good at that. I think he's good at simplifying complex arguments in an ahistorical manner to present a picture that turns members of his particular class into heroes, while feigning a certain type of, centrism that doesn't actually work. And I think that it's important to talk about this because Ezra Klein is becoming more and more influential, and his ideas are becoming more and more influential to the party and to American politics in general. So let's watch him this and talk about it. We're not going to do the whole thing. I think a lot of the meat of this is in the first bit.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, welcome back to the show.
Thanks.
Never mind. I'm going to one speed. I didn't like it. As soon as I heard the 1.2, I thought I would notice the difference. I didn't like it. Made me feel like I put Adderall in my butt.
I don't know what number time this is.
I think you're one of the. If you go back to the box space, I think you're one of the. You're on the leaderboard for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you, man.
Good to be here, Ezra. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's jump into the disagreement. You wrote a column responding to my column on Charlie Kirk.
Which is so uncomfortable.
It's okay. What was your disagreement with what I wrote after Kirk was assassinated?
I'll say one thing positive about Ezra Klein because I'm probably going to say nothing else positive about him for this entire thing. At least shout out to him for someone wrote a thing that disagreed with him, and rather than trying to own him, he was like, let's just come on and talk about it, Like imagine if you tried to do that sometime and it went weird afterwards.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me. I know that I've had to read things about myself that, criticize my work. It's never easy. And people often have a very, very different response than the one you had, which is to invite.
I hate when cool people wear Apple Watches. Sorry if you have an Apple Watch. I'm sure they're very functional. I just think aesthetically it's kind of weird.
Me here and talk it out. So I appreciate that. I want to say that up front. I felt that when I initially read the column, and I guess we should be fully transparent here and say there was a discussion between us privately before there was a public thing.
Yeah, we text.
Yeah, we did. We do text regularly, and we did text about this. So I felt like, having not done the research that I eventually did for the column, there was something off about what I knew about this guy. And the presentation of him as, and I don't want to misquote you here, but as basically a paragon of politics.
And this is important because after Charlie Kirk got a lot of the media discussion about it, if you knew nothing else, was again, like he was a conservative political activist and follower of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, who, engaged in debate with people that weren't like him and wanted to have honest conversations. And for a lot of people that are not brain poisoned by the internet, I'm sorry if you're watching this show, you're probably brain poisoned by the internet. But for a lot of people that aren't brain poisoned by the internet, like Rachel Maddow or whoever told them that that's what he was like. And they were like, oh, what a good young man. And Ezra Klein participated in that discourse. And it very much, as we've talked about before on this show, has whitewashed that legacy. And in many ways, Ta-Nehisi Coates' initial piece just felt like someone being like, hold up. Here's what he actually said, because it's worth noting in Ezra Klein's original piece on Charlie Kirk, there's no quotes from Charlie Kirk. He doesn't reference anything the guy actually said.
And how politics should be done. I think I had the same reaction that most ordinary people would have, which is absolute horror. At the idea that this guy was somewhere speaking and was killed. But I always think it's important to differentiate how people die versus how they live.
I feel like it's as simple as that.
And then after doing the research, I had to be honest with you. That's when it got really, really difficult. When I went past my initial impressions and started going through all of the clips of the things he said, the way he talked about people, the way he, described
R.I.P. Jane Goodall.
Groups in ways that, honestly, even as I was writing it, I was uncomfortable saying. And so the idea that this guy should be in any way celebrated for how he conducted politics, the fact that he just slurred across the board, all sorts of groups of people, and then ran an organization wherein, which appeared to me just a haven of hatred.
Shout out to Toilet Paper USA. It's now run by Shiro Erica Kirk. But, Coates is making an interesting point right here. Obviously, I'm going to let him speak more. But, yeah, when Ezra Klein, upper class, straight white dude, sort of whitewashes the legacy of someone who used hateful rhetoric, and some of that hateful rhetoric I do think probably motivated hateful action towards lots of marginalized and vulnerable groups. I mean, come on.
I would not want that to be a model for my politics. And I know, as we talked between us that, you are not attempting to make a statement for the entirety of it. But I guess I feel like at a certain point, somebody's legacy, or somebody does something that is so large, that it's tough to think about their legacy and take that out of it. And that's how I felt about him.
And I think especially in this age where so much of what Charlie Kirk did is intentionally on the internet, and a lot of what he did wasn't for politics and wasn't conversation. It was like clip farming and trying to create content that people would react against. I mean, it's just there. So it just, again, it feels insane in this era to live through a time where we're just acting like someone didn't say the stuff that they said, and where Ezra Klein, abundance political thought leader, is telling us that it was chill.
So I think I want to get at the right level of disagreement here. So I think one thing for me is that, I don't know, for me, the immediate hours after somebody is murdered in public, when you see that sort of grief and horror pouring out of the people who loved him, and many people loved him, my instinct then is to just sit with them in their grief, right?
This is so wild. He goes on this whole thing where it's just so wild that he's like sitting with their grief. Like, were you snuggling Erica?
To say, I can, for this moment, find some way to grieve with you, to see your friend the way, or in some version of the way you saw him, right? That's not my view.
I put my arm around Ava Braun and said, Adolf was a good painter. Wait, did he take her out in the bunker? Did Hitler take out Ava as well, or did Hitler go solo? I forget if he made her go down with the ship.
You have, the person's whole legacy, but going to people when they're grieving like that and saying,
am I saying Charlie Kirk is as morally abhorrent as Adolf Hitler? I mean, I guess not, but you're not a good guy.
Listen, I want to tell you really what I thought of your friend. Just feels like not what you do in a kind of a community.
This guy's, I don't know. I hate to call people dumb because I know he's not dumb. Maybe he is dumb. I don't know. But everything Ezra Klein is saying here would make sense if he was in physical proximity to Charlie Kirk's friends, family, and inner circle. If I was around Erica Kirk the day after Charlie got killed, I don't think I'd go up to her and be like, hey, your husband was an asshole. Because it's just not like a human thing to do. Just keep my mouth shut. I'd go find a Chipotle and have lunch. But Ezra's kind of implying, Ezra, like I know him, Mr. Klein is sort of implying that that's the normal thing to do. He wrote a column about it to get clicks for a newspaper and push people to his podcast. I don't think anything he did offered comfort to them. And I don't think anyone in that universe was like, I don't think Charlie's family was like, what is Ezra going to say?
I can see people coming down on both sides of that.
I actually think that actually is a great impulse, that after somebody's been killed, and not just killed, but because we live in the media environment that we live in, that it's seen and that it will live forever, and that person's family, you know what I mean?
That it was being looped in front of all of us.
Jesus Christ.
Which I think has a lot to do with how this was taken.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. And to have to go, like to have young kids who have to grow up knowing that is a thing that exists in the world. You know what I mean?
And I'll go.
Yeah, and I just want to shout out Jackson in the chat. Shout out Skip Intro, who notes that Ezra Klein knows what he's doing.
One step further on this. One thing I wrote about in that piece that I do worry about is I worry we are already in a cycle of political violence, of mimetic violence. I think about Pelosi. I think about Shapiro. I think about the near assassination on Trump.
It's so wild that people like this guy are like, you know what? This is a really interesting take that I'm making. I think political violence might be a thing. And my examples are like 3 incredibly rich and powerful people who have been attacked. Like, dog, this nation was obviously founded via political violence. Political violence has reinforced this ideology, the ideology of the state and this system, both at home and abroad, consistently for our entire lifetime. Like, were you sleeping during the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, Ezra Klein? Was that political violence? How about the wave of just cops getting away with killing Black people and often Black children in this country? Is that not political violence? I mean, how about the fact that tens of thousands of children are being maimed and murdered with weapons produced by this country and fired off by a nation supported by the country? Is that not political violence? Let's give you one step further of that. Like, let's look at childhood poverty rates. Let's look at a crumbling educational system and healthcare infrastructure. Are none of these things political violence? Because I think it's political mechanisms that control or influence many of the systems that I'm right now describing. I mean, we live in a country where you got the Hegsoth guy who's going in front of all the military generals and being like, listen, pussies, you gotta toughen up, and we're not doing ethics anymore, and you're just allowed to like curb stomp people to death if you want. While at the same time, El Presidente is sending the troops to Portland to, I don't know, get Fred Armisen or something. Just the way in which he acts, like this signifies some specific type of political violence. You know what it signifies? That the sort of media class is maybe under attack, and that freaks him out. That's the real thing he's probably saying.
Trump. I think about when after that happened, I thought about me, I thought about you, I thought about all kinds of people I know, right? So I do think there's just something about when violence takes hold that like, that there's something about it that it begins to breach all lines.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I guess
that was part of my reaction too.
I think all of that is understandable, but I guess, was silence not an option?
Yeah, silence to me was not grieving with people. I felt it was important as someone who is liberal, as someone who's a voice, that there are moments like that. Like, I really do feel, and it's funny because you said something like this in your piece.
I love how Coates is just so passively like, was silence not an option? It's like, yeah, you could just shut the fuck up. Like, you didn't need to do this. You didn't need to talk about it. And he's like, as a liberal, like, what is...
But it was a little bit more offhanded. The political violence like that is an attack on us all.
Right.
And that in that moment, it creates, for me...
But who's the us there? Like the political media class?
Even if it's very temporary, that it's important in a moment like that to sort of, come together, to try to see other people in their grief, to try to cool things down just a little bit. I guess, given everything you read that Charlie Kirk said, and we probably don't have very different views on the value of the things he said, why do you think he was winning?
I think this gets into a thing, and we'll talk about this, that reveals that Ezra Klein's entire political worldview is sports. He thinks that it is all sports, and that's the mechanism by which he understands it. There's two sides, and one side is winning and one side is losing, or something like that. I understand why this is a mechanism that people can use to make sense of our political reality. I don't think it's an accurate or effective one. We'll see in a second as well. This man is completely ahistorical in his analysis, which is bad. Always historicized. But, it comes down to like this winning thing. And when he says like Charlie Kirk is winning, like, what does that mean? Like, what did he win? Like, obviously he was influential, I guess, in the re-election of Donald Trump, but he was winning in the same way that like the Paul brothers win,
I mean, that's not really hard for me to understand. I mean, if I could just back up for a second, I want to say two things. I published a book 10 years ago, Between the World and Me. And one of the constant reactions to that was that it was overly pessimistic about this country. It was overly pessimistic about the future. Why are you so dark, Ta-Nehisi? Why can't you give us any sense of hope? And the reason I would always say is because any sort of sober examination of the history of this country says that those of us who believe in equality, those of us who believe in respecting the humanity of our neighbors and of everyone, that we're up against some really, really powerful forces of history and powerful narratives. And the implication of that is, however good we felt in 2013, 14, 15, 2008, there will be backlash. People, those of us who were crying in 2008 watching Obama.
And a simple way to put where it's going and what I think is the real meat of this discussion is that Coates is attempting to understand the contemporary moment via historical analysis. I think he's both looking at history as an explanatory mechanism to say, how did we get where we are? But he's also using history as a way to widen the scope of things and note that there are cycles of struggle and cycles of oppression and cycles of violence that we have seen before and that we will see again, and is using that historical account to be measured or to even be realist about what's happening now. What we see in this interview, watch a little bit more of this, is that Ezra Klein's analysis is completely ahistorical. He speaks as if history began the day before he had the thought that he is currently having, and it's wildly dangerous. And I do think this plays into one of the specific types of brain disease in our current moment, which is acting as if all that there is the now, and we have to react to the pure present and the intensity of the pure present in any given moment, with an inability to think about how we got to that moment or how that moment might be related historically.
You know what I mean? Give that speech. You know, those of us who were so moved by watching him and Michelle and step outside the car and felt so much fear for him, and then when nothing happened, felt so great about that. Those of us who believed that seeing a Black family in the White House mirroring what, you know, some of us felt the best of us was the best that we had to offer, there are other people watching that too. You know what I mean? And I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. You know, I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, you know, the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I would tell you I'd have to tell you it is.
I mean, it's just simple. You know, it's an overcomplication of things. What Klein and co are doing. The dude lived a life that was marked by hate, that promoted hate, that fostered hate, that made money off of hate. That was like his job. Like the job of Charlie Kirk was to use hateful rhetoric to play into hateful, panicky emotions to make money. Like that's what dude was doing.
The usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
Then let me flip that question actually a bit. Why are we losing?
This is just insane. Why are we losing? Like, the whole notion that politics is a zero-sum game and whoever's winning is who won the last big election. And that's all that politics is. That politics as a historical mechanism of understanding history, it just comes down to who's winning in any given moment. Also, the we here is wild. The assumption that him and Coates are even on the same team in some ways is wild. But it's such a dumb way of framing things. But this is how a certain type of dumb smart guy operates, and this is how a lot of people that work in and around the Democratic Party that make more money than any of us will ever make operate, unless there's any super rich people in the chat. Then shout out to you. They reduce things to terms that sound like they make sense, and they sound like they simplify something complex, but what they're really doing is reducing all nuance and understanding and contradiction from the conversation.
We're losing because there are always moments when we lose.
That's just so simple here. We're losing because there's always moments when we lose. Just simple historical understanding. There's no trajectory by which your political party is the early 90s Bulls and you can't be beat unless, Michael Jordan gets kicked out of the league because of gambling debts that got his dad killed. Then he goes and plays baseball and then comes back. Cycles, contradictions, things of that nature.
See, that feels very fatalistic to me.
I want to shake him. I don't want to hurt him. I don't endorse political violence, but I want to shake him a little bit. I don't know how big a man Ezra Klein is, but I want to grab him by the shoulders and I want to shake him just a little bit. It's fatalistic to acknowledge that historically political struggle and things of that nature go through cycles, especially saying this to a public intellectual and writer who's a black guy and comes from that tradition and has seen, and he talks about this, has seen that level of struggle, has seen how deep oppression goes, has seen what it's like to exist in that community. It's just insane.
It doesn't feel fatalistic to me. It feels like the truth. I mean, and let me express what I mean. I'm Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm the writer. I'm the individual, right? But I am part of something larger, and I've always felt myself as part of something larger. I have a tradition. I have ancestry. I have heritage. What that means is that I do whatever I do within the time that I have in my life, whatever time I'm gifted with. And much of what I do is built on what other people did before then. And then after that, I leave the struggle where I leave it. And then hopefully it's in a better place. Oftentimes it's not. That's the history, in fact. And then my progeny pick it up and they keep it going. I am descended from people who...
I think this is a problem with the liberal brain in general, that everything is conceived of as an immediate win. And this is why often important things are sacrificed. And Ezra Klein talks about this later in this particular interview. This is something a lot of kind of centrist liberals talk about, where they'll be like, well, we got to shut up about like abortion and trans people and stuff like that, because we got to win right now. And maybe if we just let a little bit of that slide, we'll win. There's been a lot of discussion about this recently. There was an article that came out last week that kind of explored why young men get radicalized towards the right. And Ezra's buddy, Derek Thompson, took umbrage with that from a similar angle of just like, well, listen, if we want to win, we got to let graduates of Hustlers University join our coalition, rather than thinking about building power for the sake of a long-term struggle that builds something more than just tiny immediate victories.
In their lifetime fought with all their might for the destruction of chattel slavery in this country. And they never saw it. They never saw it. In my personal belief system, they died in, defeat, in darkness. And so
this is going to sound like I'm being silly right here, but I'm not trying to be silly. But for anyone who has watched the show Andor, the Luthen character in season 1 says something to the effect of like, I am fighting and sacrificing it all for like a sunset I will never see, or a sunrise I will never see. And it also makes me think of, I think in like 2016, or maybe it was 2020, Adam Curtis went on the Chapo Trap House podcast and made a point that was like, a lot of young leftists don't understand that if they really want to make things better, things have to get worse first. Like there might be periods of struggle. Like that's what it means to actually want to change the world for the better, means that you might not get the thing. It might not be your generation. It might not be you, Ezra Klein, who wins. But participating in a struggle that doesn't win in your lifetime doesn't mean that you lost. It means that you contributed to hopefully building something of a better, more just, more egalitarian world. And if you do not think that is a worthwhile project, then your politics are going to be reduced to a type of animalistic immediacy in which all that matters is that you win in this particular moment with no regard for the future. And we think about issues like climate change especially comes up. The inability to think about the future and the future for maybe someone that isn't us has put us in a pretty bad position.
I guess the privilege that I draw out of this, the honor that I draw out of this, is not that things will necessarily be better in my lifetime, but that I will make the contribution that I am supposed to make. The fact of the matter is, as horrifying as, that the killing of Charlie Kirk was, and as horrifying as the feeling is, this moment that we are in, an era of political violence, and I don't want to sound flip here, political violence is the norm for the Black experience in this country. It just is. I don't even mean like the Malcolm.
And again, like, Ezra Klein, well, this is important to me because now political violence is real because a fellow podcaster got shot. and maybe I could get shot as a fellow white podcaster. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Oh, black people have lived with state violence coming at them every second of the day for their entire life in varying degrees, and we have to live with that violence constantly. It's just a part of the ingrained history of this country. Like, bro.
Max Martin Luther King variety of it, right? Which is the norm too. You would be hard pressed to have a conversation with a black person in this country that is a descendant of slavery and not have them be able to reach maybe right here or to tell you themselves, look, my uncle, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they lived in a small town in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Alabama. They got into some sort of dispute with a white man, and either they were lynched or we had to run. Political violence runs through us. It is our heritage. Is that good? No. Do we valorize it? Absolutely not. Do we minimize it? Absolutely not. But a life free of it is not a thing that's really in reach in my time.
So again, thinking about a difference of experience in a way that one can speak from their tradition here. Like it is as if Ezra Klein has this sort of myopic view of reality that is just from his perspective, that is for people like him, that is about people like him. And the idea that one, and especially someone who's taken really seriously as a political thinker in this country, can disconnect anything about the current moment from a long history of political violence in this country. Shout out Tyler Childers. Does he have the song Long History of Violence, a long violent history? But oh boy. Watch a little bit more of this and we'll move on.
Sometimes I think that having a historical scope that wide can make the present too deterministic.
My God. He's literally saying like, no, you don't got to think that historically. We're doing too much history. We're thinking too, like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Ezra?
So to me, I look at the last, 8, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would pay $1 million to know what's going on in Ta-Nehisi Coates' internal monologue here.
What I see having happened is we, the coalition I am in, the things I believe in.
And he never really describes his coalition other than like we and me is we. I am we, me is we. Those who are like me are a part of the we.
Lost ground. And people determinedly work to make that so. Charlie Kirk worked to make that so successfully, right? I think that when he began going to college campuses and putting out a sign at a table, what he was eventually going to build was not obvious, right? I think he worked. I think he was a successful political actor. And I think that from when in 2016, we lost to Donald Trump the first time, very narrowly, won the popular vote.
How much we
right?
used.
And then in 2020, we almost lost to him and began seeing we were losing a bunch of voters we thought we were.
So at least we know where history begins for Ezra Klein. It seems like 2016 is when history begins.
Fighting for, right? Losing more working class voters, losing non-white voters, right? Something was changing, but we won. So, okay.
Well, we won.
And then in 2024, we really got our asses handed to us.
It's like he's talking about sports. If you didn't know the context for this, it sounds like a fucking Patriots fan talking about the post Tom Brady years or something.
And we let a much more dangerous form of politics fully erupt. And I think that reflects strategic decisions they made. I think it reflects decisions we made. So I think
there's something almost sociopathic about this to me as well. I'll say more later, but I'll stop pausing. And they knew he wouldn't stop pausing, and he said it nonetheless.
Me, it's not enough to say we lost. There are backlashes. Sometimes you lose. I think it requires like a very fundamental rethinking, like a disciplined strategic.
Well, so he lets you see what he thinks Coates is saying. So he's like, it's not as simple as just sometimes we lose, as if what Coates was saying there is, well, you win some, you lose some. That wasn't what he was saying. He wasn't doing weird slogan-y platitudes. He wasn't saying you win some, you lose some. He was saying when we look at historical trajectories of various political movements and political history as an arc as a whole, we see that struggle and loss are a part of that thing. And to act as if they are not is to be naive about our current political reality. To act as if winning immediately is the only option is to obfuscate the messy mechanisms of how politics operate in the world. And that's why, of course, Coates gave examples of his family and ancestors who had to struggle for a thing they never saw and never experienced. It's not, well, you win some, you lose some. You know, the sharecroppers in Mississippi had a bad run, but now things are great. No, it's not what he's doing. And again, either Klein is completely missing that, or he gets that, but he's reframing stuff in a certain way because he knows what he's doing.
Strategic rethinking of what have we been doing? Why are people preferring this to us? And I do think that is like, it opens up into something more that I think that there is a practice of politics here. That in a narrow sense, I was talking about Kirk, but in a broad sense reflects to something that I thought was going to be an argument stretching across this show for like a year, right? I think more of it came out in this than I had intended probably. But I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off. And in writing them off, we are losing and we are unable to protect ourselves, unable to protect them, just unable to make good change in the world.
Can you say more about that writing them off, please?
I love his facial expression there.
Yeah. Why don't we start it here if we want to talk about writing them off? I've been obsessing recently for a piece I've been writing about the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment, and I want to play it.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic.
I'm with her.
You put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
You would crush at the Riyadh Comedy Festival.
Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that. And he has lifted them up. He has given voice to their websites that used to only have 11,000 people.
How many do they have now, Hillary?
Now have 11 million. He tweets and retweets. They're offensive, hateful, mean-spirited rhetoric. Now, some of those folks, they are irredeemable. But
They really thought
not
she was going to be the thing. They really thought she was going to be the thing.
What do you think when you hear that?
She probably shouldn't have said it.
Do you think it's true?
I mean, it's probably not how I would say it, but, you know, I mean, there are things that I would say, you know. I probably would say what I said earlier, you know, in the interview about the force of, and
it seems like the point that's being made here is Ezra Klein thinking about politics through the lens of sports or something is like Hillary Clinton said these people were bad and that's why we're losing because we just say people are bad. And you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates gets into this in a little bit. Again, we're not going to watch this whole thing. We'll only watch a little bit more because there's other stuff I want to talk about. Also, later in the show, Maggie Mayfish is coming on. Can't wait. But, like, there are much more interesting and complex and, I think, fully realized ways to understand what has happened since 2016 or 2020 that are not this. To risk just sounding like one of those guys right now, I mean, like we could think about class, we can think about class relations, we can think about material conditions, because again, we know that a lot of people have been driven to quote unquote the other team because the other team was the one that said, you know, of course, in bad faith and for manipulative reasons, like shit kind of sucks. It sucks out there. Your life sucks ass a little bit. And we're going to blame someone for the fact that your life sucks ass. And we're going to tell you that we're going to make your life suck less ass, whereas one party, as we know, in the 2024 election, remember that we were there, told us that, what did they tell us again? Oh yeah, they were like, oh no, the economy is good actually. Like that was a real talking point during the last election by the Democratic Party, that the economy was actually good and that we were wrong for thinking that the economy was bad. You know, we were kind of like gaslit in that sense, but there are material and economic ways to understand this stuff that go way beyond this type of analysis.
I mean, as I've been saying this probably since as long as we've been talking.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm not right. I just want to be clear about something. I shouldn't be running for president of the United States. You know what I mean? And my expectations for the rhetoric of writers, intellectuals, journalists, etc., is very, very different than what the expectation should be for people who expect to hold office.
Yeah, so I agree with, right? I think that there are different jobs in all this. But when I say we began writing people off, I think that's something that happened. And I think something I saw in this.
Jackson's cooking in the chat, so we appreciate that. Charlie makes this point right here that Ezra Klein gave an exemplary example of the white liberals' perspective of the discourse of systemic racism. Yeah. Which is like the white liberal perspective of racism is like, hey, we know that it like used to be bad. It's not so bad now. And like, if you just trust us and we'll make it better. And that's what a lot of the white liberal political project is right now, is people that look like Ezra Klein being like, hey, black people and brown people and trans people and whoever else, like, we got this. Just give us the keys to the car. You sit back there, do whatever you want to do. We got you.
Debate, but kind of like underneath it, was that the work of politics, of bridging over a lot of profound, fundamental moral disagreements, I think became somewhat demeaned, diminished. It began to seem like, in many cases, a betrayal to people. The tent shrunk. The people I feel more comfortable with wielding power shrunk. And I think what Clinton was saying there came from somewhere. It came from, the sort of culture that had emerged. It got worse over time.
Yeah, shout out Hillary Clinton, notably good at politics.
And then I think it really contributed to us losing. And meanwhile, this is why when I say, like in that initial piece, there was something that I respected in what Kirk was doing, like going in, having debates, using them opportunistically. A lot of people have thrown back at me that, he wasn't debating to find truth. Of course he wasn't debating to find the truth. He was doing politics.
He wasn't doing politics. We'll maybe wrap it up here because I know I've been talking about this for a while now. But when you go to the college and you're like, gay people are going to hell, tell me I'm wrong, or whatever it might be, or you're like screaming about how the Bible is truth, or whatever you're fucking doing, you're not doing politics. You're trying to make content. Like, that's what he was doing, is making content that reinforced a particular rage and paranoia fueled ideological position. So if doing politics is like who can get the most people mad using xenophobia and racism and Christian nationalism, I don't want to do politics then. And something that we're seeing right now in the liberal imagination is that politics is like a sport, but the sport of politics is convincing people that your cultural narrative is good, right? That like your particular narrative for how culture should work is what's important. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's how it works. You guys can watch the whole thing if you want. No one wants me to spend the whole show talking about that, but you can go watch that for yourself if that's the thing you want to do.